Okay, so I have started recording. Is that same on your end?
Yep, we're going.
Excellent. Okay, here we go. Jeez, I've not done an intro. I've not done a podcast in ages.
Come on,
Done
you're
an
the pro
intro.
here. I'm
Exactly.
relying on you here, Chris, for the
I know.
introduction.
I'm usually the very prepared for this. You see, it only takes me the one take wonder. We do a whole episode of the good bit in 1 hour, and that's us. Bang. I wish that was true. Okay,
Yep.
Pilot episode. Let's do it. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another brand new podcast here. Yes, another one. This is a brand new podcast all about the world of professional wrestling, all about the world of sports and entertainment and everything else in between. Ladies and gents, this is The Wrestling Connection. Hello again, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm joined by my good close personal friend, Glenn. Welcome, my close personal friend, Glenn.
Hello, Chris.
I was ready for you to have this massive, oh my god, are we recording? Are we live? We're live. We're live, pal.
We're live, pal.
We're live, pal. This is the pilot edition, ladies and gents, of the Wrestling Connection podcast, aptly entitled, I believe. And why is it entitled that? I'll tell you. This is going to be a podcast spreading the positivity of wrestling, spreading our passion for the sport of professional wrestling, and just talking about how wrestling connects us all. I thought it was an appropriate name. Glenn seemed to agree.
Yeah, I certainly did. You do rather make us sound like the New Day, though, Chris. Spreading the power of positivity. But you're right. In these dark and uncertain times, wrestling is the perfect form of escapism. So it seems appropriate that would be our focus right now.
And you mentioned these dark times. Let's address the elephant in the room. There's no actual elephant. Let's just talk about that's just a phrase. This is obviously not how we want to sound. We're not as clear and pristine and as beautiful as we'd like to be, because we're obviously currently recording this remotely. Basically, if you're listening to this in the near future, firstly, hello, we hope everything is well in the future, wherever you are. But on recording date, this is April of 2020, the day after WrestleMania 36, so it's a very apt time to start a new wrestling podcast, right? And as the new season of the wrestling year starts, the day after WrestleMania, we are here to bring some more wrestling chat. You're probably wrestled out. I'm always kind of wrestled out after WrestleMania week, but this year, not so much, because there's been no build-up, really. There was no Hall of Fame. There was no NXT. There was just 2 nights of wrestling with no audience. How did you enjoy WrestleMania, just as a brief sort of note?
I loved it. I really did. I think when you make a judgment on this particular WrestleMania and when we look back on it over in years to come, and it is maybe perhaps going to be unfair to compare it to the WrestleManias that came before it and indeed which will come afterwards, this has to be appreciated within the context of 2020 and considering what they were up against. I think it was a real achievement. It's not going to be something that you'll maybe sit down and watch as much as WrestleMania 17 or WrestleMania 24, but considering what they were up against, I think they did it. I think they hit it out of the park.
Absolutely. I mean, circumstances as they were, I thought they did as good as they could. I thought some of the matches were excellent. You know what I mean? Like in terms of in-ring, it almost felt as if they were all trying a bit harder. And I don't like to use that because I know they always try really hard and do it on a great show. But it's almost as if they were like, right, this needs to be extra special in the ring. This needs to have this sort of main event feel, even though there's no one else here. And let me tell you something, as a performer, when there's no crowd to bounce off of, especially when you're doing something that kind of elicits a reaction, it's like one of the hardest things in the world to do. So I applaud them greatly.
Absolutely. And, for me, I'm not a performer as such in the same exact way, but so really my judgment on it really comes down to all I can comment on, which is what was it like for me as an audience member. And after a couple of minutes, I almost at times forgot that there wasn't an audience there. And so
absolutely.
It was just, and if you think about it, if you go to a local wrestling show like an ICW at the garage, or even if you go to the Hydro and see the WWE, there is no audience until you are there making the noise. So it was really just putting that agency back on us. But it still helped, though, that the wrestlers themselves were more vocal and verbal and gave us still that sense of pantomime, which we love about wrestling. That's what we want. We had this at the Grado show that we recently attended as well. The audience is crucial, but they more than compensated, I think.
I think I noticed that the most when they were doing the introductions in the ring, like when it was like a title match or whatever, and the guy, what's his name, Mike Rome, he was going Becky Lynch, and it was utter silence. You know, what I mean? It was a tad strange.
Similarly, like whenever he would say that, hey, this match is scheduled for one fall, I'm just some little tiny voice in my soul, Chris, would go one fall. But no, there was no crowd. Isn't it amazing that one fall has taken off? Because maybe I'm wrong here, and perhaps in the weeks and months to come, somebody will correct me about this. But I've always thought that one fall was created in ICW. Am I wrong there?
I think it became a thing in ICW, and people are going to say a lot of the sort of UK indies and other indies picked it up and also kind of made it their own. But I think ICW was the one that really kind of pushed it as an actual catchphrase. And I believe like it was like a sort of backyard wrestling sort of thing.
Right, okay.
In that sort of era where like backyard wrestling was a thing. I suppose it's getting a wee bit of a resurgence now, but like when people had DVDs and they would send it to people and that sort of thing, and they would invite people to these sort of events to, you know, they built a ring in a field or something like that. And I think that's kind of where it originated. I'm not entirely sure. That's just off of a memory. But in terms of sort of pushing it to the fact to get out to WWE, and it got to WrestleMania to the point where Vince was like, why is he pausing? Damn it. They don't do any pauses. I think that's got to be an ICW thing.
It feels like it, because when I think back to it, that was the first time I ever heard it was going to ICW shows in the garage. And you know, when I think of that crowd noise, I always hear it with a slight Glasgow accent. I always hear it as one fall, you know, the very kind of passionate and raucous, like as that kind of old Glasgow way of being at a wrestling show would go. You mentioned backyard wrestling, though. Mark my words, Chris. COVID-19 will cause the resurgence of backyard wrestling, literally.
Right.
People are going to be building rings or wrestling out their paddle pills just to cure the boredom of what's going on, which is hilarious, I think, because if that were to happen, it would be fantastic. Obviously, don't try this at home.
Absolutely. Don't be a bonehead. Don't be a clown. Please leave the danger to us.
God, that is just burned in my memory. I used to waste, maybe waste isn't the right word, but the amount of blurry, pixelated online backyard wrestling matches I would watch, like pre-MySpace, on like stupidvideos.com and pre-YouTube video streaming websites, and on MySpace's video streaming platform as well. I think that was a thing. I watched a lot of crappy wrestling because when I was 14 or 15, we stopped at a certain point. We stopped having digital, so I couldn't watch the WWE on Sky as it was broadcast.
Right.
I could only see highlights. So I got my wrestling fix from either my video and DVD collection or crappy pixelated backyard wrestling.
I love it. Did you ever do any backyard wrestling in your day?
Kind of. One thing which I think we'll maybe talk about in more detail in the weeks, months, etc. to come on the podcast is Rebellion 2001. But one thing I'll say quickly now is that first of all, for context, when I was 10, I was at WWF Rebellion 2001 in Manchester, in the height of the invasion angle. When I say I was at it, I was in attendance. I was not on the show.
I'd not done some backyard wrestling in my day. However, I was on Rebellion 2001.
Yeah, I wasn't booked. I'm not booked.
Who are you? And I was Beyond the Mat.
Yeah, that's the guy who does the trampoline workout. He's still going.
What's his name? Dennis Stamp? Is that his name?
That Dennis Stamp. Who actually formed a tag team with Grado at one point, believe it or not.
So he did. Look at this knowledge here. This is what you're going to get here on the Wrestling Connection. Dennis Stamp, backyard wrestling, and a lot of Rebellion 2001. As you were. Sorry, you were saying about Rebellion.
No, backyard wrestling. Robert, my best friend is Robert, and he and I have been wrestling daft since we were very, very, very small. And he came with me to Rebellion 2001, and one of my standout memories from that trip, not from the show but from the trip, was Robert's father chokeslamming him on the bed in the hotel whilst William
All
Regal
right.
versus Tajiri from the previous week's SmackDown was playing in the background, and my Pokemon, my Game Boy Color was kind of almost melting to a crisp because it had crashed from an exploder thing. I'm going in all sorts of directions here. He got choke slammed on the bed, and not only did it break the bed, but a bit of wood went right into Robert's back, and he could barely move for quite a while. That makes his father sound terrible. That he's a lovely guy, but yeah, that's so the bits of that. But I think my wrestling, backyard wrestling, peaked when Robert taught me how to do a figure 4 leg lock.
Okay.
Which I can still do to this day, although like I've not had anyone willing to participate in said submission moves. I did get caught jumping on a couch a few times as well, elbow dropping pillows, swanton bombing pillows from the couch. I distinctly remember my mum absolutely verbally laying the smackdown on me for catching me doing that in the living room. I must have been about 11 or 12. I had No Mercy 1999 on in the background, Jeff Jarrett versus Chyna, and because that was such a scrappy, hardcore, well, Good Housekeeping match, I decided to practice not so good housekeeping by nearly breaking the furniture. So that's the extent of mine. What about you, though? I mean, you strike me as a trampoline kind of guy, Chris.
Absolutely. I've never told you about this before. I was a big trampoline guy.
Maybe you have, and maybe that's why it's there in the back of my mind. But, honestly, it felt like a hunch.
Well, yeah, I don't want to call myself a backyard wrestler. However, I did have my own company. It was called CWA. It was Chris's Wrestling Association. And yeah, it's good. I think it was about 2003 when I came up with it, and it was like, oh my God, I have my own company. Better start signing those checks.
Can you imagine, though, if that was just the way it was done? Vince's Wrestling Federation. To this day, Vince's Wrestling Entertainment. Oh, God.
Your winner and the new VWE World Champion. No, so the CWA was formed in around 2003 with me and my friend Jack. And we started just having wrestling matches with, teddy bears and steady and other things. And then I got a trampoline. I started kind of getting good at trampoline stuff. I found out I was quite athletic, started doing all these mad, ridiculous flips and stuff. And, I'm very lucky I've never broken a bone or I've never injured myself, but I used to do some pretty silly stuff when it came to trampoline, that sort of thing. But then when I got into YouTube, this is all, content for another episode, another day. So we'll go into it in great detail down the line. But I started YouTube in around 2007. And I kind of started putting videos on YouTube and that sort of thing. And I thought, okay, let's film the backyard wrestling stuff and have weekly episodic programs like Raw on YouTube. And we will be the shortest running weekly episodic television show in history. And it was called CWA, had all these different names. Online was one of them. CWA Elite, which I might get copyright infringement for nowadays. But it was good. I had lots of characters. My character was called Christoph Hero.
Brilliant.
Because I once saw Chris Hero wrestle, and I thought, I'm tall. I can move quite well. And Chris Hero's not in WWE. Nobody knows who he is. So I'll just call myself Christoph Hero.
Yep, you had
that was my name. There. Yeah, look what he is now. Yep. He's Cassius Ono, and he's one of my favourites ever. But yeah, so that was my backyard wrestling story. However, it was a thing that I used to look forward to. I used to write the shows, and I got loads of my friends involved, and they had their own characters and that sort of thing. It was one of my favourite times in my fandom and in my life. And actually, thinking about it now, I look forward to sort of deep diving into that somewhere down the line. So I love how the tangents we go on here is going to be apropos for the rest of this podcast, because it's going to be something that happens an awful lot. Just a warning to any listeners out there. But let's talk about the podcast then. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing. This is, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but we are doing sort of podcasts about how wrestling connects us all, and we're going to be doing more kind of generic themes behind the podcast and behind the wrestling business. We could do, our weekly viewings and our weekly reviews and that sort of thing, but I feel like it dates it a little bit. I'm turning into Vince talking about WrestleMania shouldn't have a number, because then they'll be dated. I think we should do general episodes.
You'll need to just go back and remove that entire discussion about WrestleMania 36.
Well, I know. This happened yesterday. No matter when you're listening to this is happening yesterday.
Yep.
We're going to do loads of episodes. I sent Glenn a text the other night with about 25 or something episode titles that we can do, so at least we've got a few ideas in the bag anyway. And we do intend to be in the same room, when we do these things, whether it be at my place or at a studio somewhere or whatever. We'll try and be in the same room talking into the same microphone. But because of the whole COVID-19 pandemic and all that stuff, we are stuck. I shouldn't really say stuck. I don't like using the word stuck. We are safe at home.
Yes.
Self-isolating the best way we can, watching a bunch of wrestling and connecting over Zoom and connecting over other things here online. So hopefully this works okay and we can do this for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, we fully intend to be in the same room, having these discussions in person, and we very much anticipate that being the case in the near future. Is that something you're up for?
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, I think this is prime time players. This is prime time for something like this.
Absolutely.
Now everybody all of a sudden has a lot of time on their hands. You mentioned that people are maybe a bit wrestled out right now from WrestleMania, but yeah. I also feel like because of the way of the world right now, because we are all isolating, people are needing more content for things. So maybe, Chris, the stars might align, and people might find that listening to this is yet another thing that they can do to help them get through what is a difficult time.
Well, I hope so, and that's going to be something for us to do during this difficult time. Being able to chat wrestling on a weekly basis. We're going to try to be weekly. That's another announcement to make.
Yep.
We are yet to decide on a day of the week, but we're thinking maybe the weekend, something like that, to kind of celebrate a hard week's work and a week of wrestling. We can kind of round everything off and chat about a general topic of the weekend. That sounds a lot of fun. And also, if this thing works well in terms of being remote, then we might even not have to be in the same room, but we're thinking we're going to be in the same room. But if this works well, then we've always got this to fall back on if one of us are busy or whatever,
Absolutely, that's always something to bear in mind. You mentioned that this is something for us to do, and that's what it really is for me. I'm not under any delusion that this is going to be the next hot podcast that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people listen to. To be honest, if two people listen to this, then fine. For me, it's nice to finally have this outlet, to have someone to talk to about a shared passion like this in this routine way as well. And with the world the way it is, this is probably the best time to start getting something like this off the ground.
Have you ever done any podcasting before? Have you ever done any sort of YouTube stuff or any videos or whatever like this before?
I do have a history of phone and radio.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So this is another niche story, but I don't know if you ever watched I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Very popular reality TV show over in this country.
Absolutely, yeah, one of my favourites.
Well, in 2017, the chap who came in third was radio DJ Ian Lee.
Oh, of course, I know Ian Lee very well, yes.
Personally, he's he's been doing phone-in radio in various forms on various stations for a very, very long time, over 2 decades or around that time. But for the last 10 or 11 years or so, I've been sporadically phoning into his shows. And at one point, maybe about 10 years ago, I was something of a regular, but now I phone him every now and then. I actually spoke to him last week on Zoom because he had some listeners do a Zoom lunch club with him, and I most recently, the most notable conversation I had with him was actually the day before my wedding. I had a wee pep talk on the radio with him.
That's nice. What did he say to you before your wedding? Did he give you advice and that sort of thing?
He did give me advice, but it was the kind of the typical advice of savor every moment. But the conversation was more about the loneliness of the night before your wedding, and it is a very lonely time. Maybe for some people are surrounded by families but for me, I was in my flat on my own, and my good wife was of course away getting ready for the wedding in another location. I sound like Stephanie McMahon there. It's taking place in other locations. Dated reference, get it out.
Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, it was kind of therapeutic, and it set the nerves at ease, and it was profound for me because I had been phoning him since I was about 18 or 19, and there I was, a fair bit older, not too much older, and getting a bit of a more mature adult pep talk from the man. So that's the closest I've come to anything like this. I've never, whereas I do have a YouTube account, it's just where I've occasionally posted clips from wrestling shows I've been at. But beyond that, it's that this is all relatively new to me.
Well, that's exciting though. It's always like a new kind of project to kind of work on, and it's something to look forward to. I've always found I've got a bit of a history with podcasting. I started a podcast in fact, my very first podcast was in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
and it was called Wrestling Undisputed, and it was hosted on Skype with my friend Evan, who I connected to through
Oh yeah.
YouTube. He was known on YouTube as the WWE Evan. Shout out to Evan if he's still out there somewhere.
Yeah,
Um,
I was a follower of Evans actually before I was a follower of yours, Chris.
Well, that's noted, and you will not be invited back. So, we started a wee podcast where it was kind of like a call-in show. We'd have other YouTubers and other wrestling fans that we knew in our circle. Pardon the pun. Sorry, Chris Jericho. And we did a sort of call-in show where we talked about Christian not having the world title for very long, and we talked about CM Punk, and we talked about Triple H taking over the company and everything that was going on in WWE in 2011. Fast forward till about 2015, I want to say, and I just got mad into podcasts. I started listening to all of the wrestling ones, all of the sort of comedic actor ones, all that sort of thing. And I got into the Impractical Jokers podcast, which was called What Say You with Sal and Hugh. I got into loads of them and I loved them. So I thought I'm going to do my own podcast. It's going to be called The Chris Moffat Show. Very creative, much like CWA. And I sat in my dining room with one microphone and I sat myself. And I reviewed, I think it was Extreme Rules 2015, maybe, or it might have been the one before that, Payback 2015. I reviewed the show. It was a lot of fun, but I thought, right, okay, I need to try and change it up a little bit. I can't just be myself every single time. I probably could have done, but I just kind of wanted to try something new and get a different dynamic on the show. And then I started a podcast called By the Way, and it was the most generic. It was the most, I don't even know. It was a lot of fun, but there was no direction, there was no theme, there was no genre, it was nothing. It was me and my childhood best pal, and we'd literally just catch up and record it. And then we got to like 55 odd episodes, and it was a lot of fun. It was one of my favourite things to do every week. But unfortunately, that became no more. Glenn actually listened to By the Way a bunch, and I believe that he told me one time that I used to talk him to sleep, which I always found a bit strange.
It's true. You did, and I was a big fan of that podcast. Oddly enough, I said the same thing to Kenny McIntosh, obviously of Inside the Ropes fame, once when I met him, and it was one of those moments where you meet somebody who's well known in your wrestling community. You have a brief interaction with them, and then you walk away going, "That was the creepiest thing I could have said to anyone who I actually really admire." Hi, Mr. McIntosh,
Yeah,
big fan of your work. You talk me to sleep.
Yes, I saw Kenny McIntosh in Tesco the other day. Did I tell you that?
You did, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so that was my podcast in around 2016 sort of time. It was called By the Way. And then I started drama school. I met a bunch of fellow aspiring actors and film lovers, and I managed to talk one of my friends into getting a Cineworld Unlimited card with me. And we said, let's document this. Let's do this every week. Let's document what films we're seeing with the Unlimited card. It's myself and my friend Aaron Docker, the very talented actor, and we sat in a little studio at my drama school and we created the Good Bit podcast. It was all about movies and TV and theatre and everything that we were seeing, and it's still going today. It's very sporadic now. There's no real consistency to it, which I'd love to get back to. But around 2017, 2018 sort of time, it was new episode almost every fortnight. And it was definitely the most success I ever got with podcasting. And I love movies a lot. I'm a big movie fan. I watch lots of movies and always go to the cinema and that sort of thing. However, chatting about something on a podcast for a while means you have to be really passionate about something. And I'm very, very passionate about movies. However, there's one thing I'm a little bit more passionate about, and I was missing not talking about wrestling in a long form sort of. I wasn't really doing many YouTube videos on wrestling anymore. I try to do them like once a week now, but I missed kind of going long form on wrestling, so I thought I need to start a wrestling podcast at some point. And I just so happened to run into my good close personal friend Glenn, who is equally as mental about wrestling as I am in terms of remembering silly facts, remembering dates, remembering matches. And I thought we could have a lot of fun here. We've got a lot of good stories between us in terms of being wrestling fans and our fandom. So why not document it here? And there we have introducing the Wrestling Connection podcast right here, right now. So welcome everybody. This is now a new project. I hope everybody enjoys. We're going to try and do every week, but we are both very busy boys, and but we will make time because this is a new project. We're both looking forward to it, and we have a bunch of episodes lined up. Are you looking forward to any in particular?
I think the wrestling figure idea that we have to talk about our shared passion of collecting wrestling figures in our younger years is something that I can really get behind, because there's so many daft stories that come out off the back of that. I'd
Yeah.
love to talk about the various encounters that we both had, both separately and together, with various wrestling personalities and stars in WWE and AEW. But the thing that I look forward to the most about this, Chris, is something that you actually have already mentioned this evening, and that is, or sorry, not this evening, this podcast. Dated reference, get rid of it. Something that you've already mentioned, and that is the fact that we go into tangents like anyone does with a friend when they have conversations. I suppose the point I'm trying to make to anyone listening to this is that apart from a general idea or a theme at the top end of each podcast that we do, it's not overly contrived. I can't speak for you, Chris, but this feels very natural to me, and
Totally.
and I think that comes part and parcel of talking about something that you're passionate about and that you have so many fond memories of. And so for me, all I can say by way of reassurance to anyone listening to this is that what they're going to get from us is as much passion as they will get tangents and daftness in equal measure.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to getting this off the ground and seeing where it can go from here. So I hope that this has provided a good flavour for what's yet to come.
Yeah. We want to encourage, all wrestling fans, old, new, young, anyone out there who loves wrestling and has watched wrestling for any amount of time, who has any sort of like favorite certain thing about wrestling or anything. We want to connect with everybody. We want to chat about things we love about the whole sport, the whole genre. And at first I was thinking, my God, are we going to have enough content to do every week? Is there enough stuff about wrestling that we can talk about? And then when I started kind of putting pen to paper and I started thinking, okay, the amount of stuff that we could literally just go down so many rabbit holes talking about is crazy. So we have so much lined up. We've got a couple little sort of segments that we're going to try and do. Glenn referenced one there. Meet a wrestler. We're going to talk about any encounters that we've had in terms of meeting wrestlers at signings or at shows or anything like that. Any funny stories? I can already think of a bunch of funny ones in my head now. So we'll maybe do like a story, an episode or something like that, and try and break them up over the time. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've met more wrestlers than I have, I think. So I think you have a lot more stories than I have. So I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Really, I thought we were quite equal for that, but I suppose time will tell. Tune in to find out.
And also, we're going to recommend a match every single week to each other and to you, the listeners. And we can recommend checking a match out on YouTube, or whether it be on the WWE Network or anywhere else you can access the good old sport of wrestling. We'll recommend a match and we can chat about it the following week and chat about why we like that match and or why we hate that match, depending on what it is. And also one that Glenn brought up, I thought was a genius idea, was discuss moments in wrestling that we are thankful for and something that we would rather forget about. So matches that and moments that we pure love, that we adore, that bring back lovely memories, as well as moments that we may prefer to forget. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we were going to be fairly lighthearted. We're not going to talk about the scandals and the tragedies that have cursed wrestling, but the things that are quite tongue-in-cheek, things that we would rather forget. I'm talking about Mae Young's hand. I'm talking about stuff like that.
There you go. Perfect. That sounds good. And it'll be something funny as well. We can kind of pick out certain moments that were like, that was just one of the most awful things ever. However, I must say, you and I are very positive when it comes to wrestling, because we kind of see the bigger picture, and I kind of like that. I want to spread that. We need some much needed positivity in the wrestling world today, especially after a big show like WrestleMania. You know what I mean? So every time something massive happens, whether it be a WrestleMania that has gone on when maybe it should have been postponed, or where there's a big scandal with a performer or whatever, there's always all this negativity that is just hit on social media or just hit in a live audience. We're here to kind of turn those frowns upside down and talk about the positive side of things.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe that will actually become something that people throw back at us as a critique, that we are quite positive. But the way you phrased it is, for me, spot on. It's seeing the bigger picture, and it's giving everything a fair chance. And so I am quite positive when it comes to wrestling. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to be critical. I'm sure you won't hold back from that as well. But by the same token, this is fictional performance art, and you wouldn't judge a whole book by the very first chapter. And that's generally the approach that I have when I talk about anything in wrestling.
Yeah, totally. You're a teacher. I'm an actor.
Well, teaching's a generous
we have
word.
different. No, you are. I've heard you're a very good teacher. We not that I've spoke to any of your students though. That was
those bribes went well.
Exactly. So we have sort of different backgrounds and different kind of ways of living, but we still come together and connect through wrestling. You know, so it's going to be good to kind of share our different perspectives on that. But next week, in terms of coming to our first official episode, I have entitled it very appropriately, "How Did We Become Wrestling Fans?" And we will sit and we will tell each other, because I genuinely don't know and I'm genuinely interested. We're going to tell each other our full, long-form wrestling story. How did we become fans? What was the first thing we saw? How did we know we were going to be hooked? Early memories, all that stuff. We'll go into long form about that next week. Plus, we'll talk about how wrestling connected us, how it brought Glenn and I together to the point where we're now sitting hosting a wrestling podcast together. And it's going to be a lot of fun next week right here on the Wrestling Connection podcast. Where can you find us? Well, you found us, hopefully, on some podcasting outlets that I'm not entirely sure what they're going to be yet, because this is our pilot episode and we're going to try doing all that stuff in post. But hopefully, all the good ones, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those ones, we'll try and get on there as soon as possible. In terms of social media, we had a bit of a fight with Twitter before. What did we agree the title? What did we agree the Twitter handle's going to be?
We're at WrestleConnect1, Chris.
WrestleConnect1. That's where you can find us.
Yeah, that's at WrestleConnect1, not at WrestleConnect1, Chris. That'd be weird.
Yeah, that would be strange. We could have just put my name in there. But yeah, when I was signing up to all the accounts earlier on, I had to put in my full name. So in terms of all of our profiles, we are now Chris Glenn, just so you know. So yes, on Twitter, we are at WrestleConnect1. We will have a Gmail that fans and listeners can write into. We'll have a Facebook page, surely. We'll have an Instagram page soon, all that stuff. But that's all coming in due course. But you can follow us now anyway at WrestleConnect1 on Twitter. And of course, right here, the Wrestling Connection podcast. Last words to our listeners before we sign up for our original and inaugural episode.
Last words.
Last words.
Words. Well, ironically, Chris, that at this moment I'm lost for words because a breaking news story just flashed on my phone. But I am not going to tell you about that breaking news story because that would date the podcast, and we will not be doing that. Plus, all the news is bad news right now. No, my final words is that like I've said, whether 2 people or 102 or perhaps even more listen to this, it really is it's a labor of love for us, and it's a very genuine endeavor. It's something that we've long talked about doing, and we're finally getting a chance to do it. So if you just want a little bit of time every week to hear some daft stories about wrestling, that's pretty much what this is going to be. It's going to be very positive, and the New Day would be proud of us, put it that way.
The New Day would be proud of us, and if we can somehow get Big E to come on this show and shout at us, that would be incredible. But until that happens, folks, thanks so much for listening to the pilot episode. We would absolutely love some feedback. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what we can improve on, what we need to work on, what you liked, what you didn't like for our official episode 1, which will be coming next week, 7 days from today, whenever this day is. We will have episode 1 of the Wrestling Connection podcast, how we became wrestling fans. But until then, my name is Chris. This is my good, close personal friend, Glenn. And until next time, folks, thanks so much for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, this is the Wrestling Connection podcast.